Have you ever felt like no matter how much you try, life keeps circling back to the same problems, the same routines, and the same frustrations? You try to change your habits, adjust your goals, maybe even shift your environment, yet reality seems stubbornly resistant. It's as if there's an invisible wall between where you are and where you want to be. That invisible wall is not the outside world. It's not the people around you. It's not even your circumstances. It's your observer, the part of you that interprets reality before you even consciously process it. Most people don't realize they're living life through a kind of preset lens. This default observer state was shaped long before today by past experiences, family beliefs, cultural expectations, and old stories you've told yourself about who you are. Once it's in place, it quietly keeps you trapped in familiar patterns. Think of it like a pair of glasses you forgot you're wearing. These glasses tint everything you see, but because you've had them on for so long, you assume this is just how reality looks. This is why you might notice opportunities too late, replay the same arguments in relationships, or repeat cycles of self-sabotage despite your best intentions. Your observer is running the show, and it filters reality to confirm what it already believes. Let's pause and reflect. What you call reality is actually filtered information. The brain is bombarded with millions of bits of data every second, but it can only process a tiny fraction of that. So how does it decide what to keep and what to ignore? By using your lens, your mental filter. This filter determines what you notice, what feels important, and even what you consider possible. For example, if you believe the world is full of scarcity, your observer will spotlight proof of lack, missed chances, competition, things slipping through your fingers. But if your lens shifts toward abundance, suddenly you start noticing opportunities that were always there, but hidden in your blind spots. Neuroscience gives us a clear explanation. The reticular activating system, RAS. This network in your brainstem acts like a gatekeeper, allowing in information that matches your expectations and filtering out what doesn't. It's why you can suddenly notice a car you're thinking of buying everywhere on the road, even though those cars have always been there. Layered on top of that is confirmation bias, your brain's tendency to search for evidence that supports what you already believe. Together, these mechanisms keep you locked inside your default observation patterns. It's not that reality is limited. It's that your observer keeps showing you the same slice of it again and again. Here's where it gets fascinating. Imagine two people walking into the same networking event. One person sees a room full of intimidating strangers. Their observer whispers, "You don't belong here. No one will be interested." They notice awkward silences, people who seem too busy, and signs that confirm their fears. By the end of the night, they leave convinced, "I was right. This was a waste of time." The second person, walking into the same event, carries a different lens. Their observer expects connection and opportunity. They notice friendly smiles, overhear conversations they can contribute to, and pick up on openings others miss. By the end of the night, they leave with new contacts, maybe even a job lead. Same event, same room. Two completely different realities, constructed not by the external world, but by the observer behind the eyes. So if you've been wondering why change feels so hard, here's the truth. It's not because you lack discipline, motivation, or resources. It's because your observer problem keeps recycling the same experiences. You've been trying to build a new life while looking at reality through the same old lens. And until that lens shifts, your outer world will keep snapping back into its old form, like gravity pulling you back into the familiar. Now, here's the good news. Your observer isn't fixed. It can be reprogrammed. In the coming chapters, we'll uncover what the observer function actually is, how your beliefs, expectations, and mental models quietly script your everyday reality, how to identify your current observer settings, so you can finally see the invisible patterns that have been running the show, the reset process, powerful ways to interrupt, and rewire those patterns at the level of your brain. And Perception, how to install new observer. Programs, so your mind is tuned to spot opportunities, solutions, and synchronicities instead of problems. What happens when reality starts shifting? The signs, the surprises, and the resistance you'll face as your world begins to transform. And finally, how to maintain your new reality so the changes don't fade away, but compound into a life that feels expansive, fluid, and limitless. For now, I'll leave you with this thought. If two people can walk into the same room and experience completely different worlds, what might you be missing in your own life? Not because it isn't there, but because your observer simply isn't tuned to see it? If the previous section left you with the realization that your reality is not as objective as it seems, then here's where we start peeling back the layers. The observer problem is not just some abstract concept, it's an ongoing, active function of your mind. This function is quietly shaping every single moment of your life, whether you're aware of it or not. To understand why you feel stuck, you must first understand what your observer function is and how it operates. At its core, the observer function is the collection of beliefs, expectations, and mental models through which you interpret the world. Imagine that your mind is a movie projector. The projector isn't neutral. It has a reel inside that determines what plays on the screen. That reel is your observer function. It decides what story unfolds in front of you, even though you may think you're just watching life as it is. The truth is, you're not watching reality directly. You're watching your edited version of it. Your beliefs form the backbone of this system. If you believe that people can't be trusted, your observer will highlight every moment that seems to confirm this and filter out signs of kindness or generosity. If you believe success is only possible through endless struggle, then your observer will filter the world to prove you right. You'll see struggle everywhere and barely notice ease when it appears. The observer function doesn't ask what's objectively true. It asks what's consistent with what you already hold as true. And once it finds evidence, it hands it to you as proof that reality is exactly as you thought. Expectations are the second layer of this function. Think of them as forecasts your mind makes without your conscious approval. If you've had a string of failed relationships, your observer quietly starts expecting failure. So when you meet someone new, your filter is already tuned to watch for cracks, flaws, and disappointments. On the other hand, if your past has been full of supportive people, your observer leans toward expecting support, and lo and behold, you tend to find it. These expectations are rarely explicit. They operate like background apps on your phone, draining energy and shaping your experience without you noticing. Then come mental models, the invisible rules about how the world works. Maybe you've built a model that says, hard work equals worthiness, or money is scarce and difficult to obtain. These models aren't facts. They're blueprints your observer uses to organize what it sees. Two people can step into the same economy, one finding endless opportunity and the other finding only barriers, simply because their mental models are different. Now here's where things get even more interesting. There's a massive difference between passive observation and active reality creation. Most people assume they're passive witnesses of life, that their job is to simply notice what's happening. But the observer function doesn't just notice. It selects, amplifies, and even creates what becomes real for you. When you shift from being a passive observer to an active reality creator, you begin to recognize that your attention is like a spotlight. Wherever you aim it, reality seems to reorganize itself around that focus. You've already experienced this, even if you didn't realize it. Think back to the time you considered buying a particular car, and suddenly that exact car was everywhere. It wasn't that the car population multiplied overnight. Your observer simply tuned your attention to notice it, creating the feeling of a reality suddenly filled with what you were focusing on. This is the same principle that governs how your life plays out, except instead of cars, it's opportunities, problems, connections, or challenges. Your past experiences play a huge role in programming your observer. Every significant moment leaves behind a sort of instruction that gets filed into your system. If you grew up hearing that money causes problems, your observer carries that instruction and continues filtering reality in line with it. If you experienced betrayal in friendship, your observer may hold onto that template and project it forward into new relationships. In other words, the past doesn't just live in your memories, it lives in your filters, quietly scripting your present and your future. And this is where science begins to blur into something almost mystical. In quantum physics, observation doesn't just reveal reality, it influences it. At the subatomic level, particles behave differently when observed, as though the act of watching collapses endless possibilities into a single outcome. This doesn't mean you can bend the universe at will like a movie superhero, but it does highlight a profound parallel. Observation is not neutral. The very act of observing changes what is observed. What does this mean for you? It means your observer function is not a passive camera capturing the world. It's more like a director shaping the movie of your life. Your beliefs, expectations, and models are calling the shots. They determine the script, the characters, even the lighting of your experiences. And most of this is happening beneath the surface, in ways you've never stopped to question. But here's the breakthrough. Once you see this function for what it is, you can begin to step out of automatic programming. You can stop being a passive character in the story and start editing the script. You don't need to keep replaying the same reel over and over again. You can swap it out for a new one that's aligned with the reality you actually want to live. So the real question isn't whether your observer function exists. It does. The real question is, which observer are you letting run the show? The one programmed by your past, or the one you consciously choose to create? This shift, moving from unconscious filters to deliberate creation, is what sets the stage for the next chapter. Because before you can reset your observer, you first have to identify exactly how it's currently wired. And that's where we're headed next. By now, you understand that the observer is not just a passive witness, but the filter through which your entire life is being interpreted. The next step is to turn that lens inward and ask, how is my own observer currently set? What default programming is running quietly in the background, deciding what I notice and what I ignore, what feels possible and what feels out of reach? Most people never stop to investigate this. They assume their reactions, perceptions, and even their moods are natural responses to the way things are. But in reality, they are responses to the way their observer is tuned. Think of it like listening to a radio. The signal you hear depends entirely on the frequency you've dialed into. If you're tuned to a station broadcasting sadness and scarcity, that's all you'll hear. If you're tuned to one playing opportunity and abundance, your whole mood shifts. The tricky part is that many of us don't even realize we're on a particular station. We've been listening to it for so long that we've mistaken it for silence, for reality itself. So how do you begin to identify your settings? The first clue comes from the stories you tell yourself. Notice the explanations you give when things don't work out. Do you find yourself saying, "That always happens to me," or "Nothing ever works out"? Those aren't harmless phrases. They are reflections of your observer program reinforcing itself. They reveal whether you are running on a frequency of victimhood, scarcity, or limitation. On the other hand, if your inner voice says, "This setback is temporary," or "There's something I can learn here," then your observer is tuned toward resilience and growth. Another clue lies in the patterns that repeat in your life. If you keep facing the same kinds of disappointments in love, money, or career, it's rarely because the world is conspiring against you. It's because your observer is locked onto that channel. Until you notice it, you'll continue to unconsciously select, attract, or even create situations that match the frequency of your settings. Take, for instance, the common trap of the victim mentality. This setting convinces you that life is happening to you, that you are powerless in the face of circumstances. From that position, everything looks unfair, and the brain highlights every example that supports this view. Another trap is scarcity thinking. the deep-seated expectation that there's never enough time, money, or opportunity. Through that lens, every decision feels pressured, every risk feels dangerous, and every gain feels temporary. These aren't just mindsets. They are observer functions at work, filtering your perception so that the world keeps proving you right. And then there are limiting beliefs, the hidden instructions installed long ago that quietly shape your possibilities. Maybe you were told you're not creative, and so your observer conveniently edits out moments of inspiration, ensuring you don't notice your own ideas. Or maybe you believe that people like you never become wealthy, and so your observer downplays opportunities that could lead to prosperity, steering you toward safer, smaller choices. The real challenge in identifying these settings is that they are so close to you, they feel invisible. Like trying to see the back of your own head without a mirror, you can't spot them directly. That's why self-audit techniques are essential. You have to create a gap between what you experience and how you interpret it. Start by paying attention to your language. What words do you consistently use when describing your situation? Pay attention to what irritates you in others. Often, those irritations are reflections of the lens you're unconsciously wearing. Most importantly, pay attention to what you never seem to notice at all. Your blind spots are just as revealing as your recurring frustrations. Catching your observer in action can feel like watching a magician reveal a trick. Suddenly you realize that the story you've been living by is not the only story available. You begin to see that your reactions, assumptions, and even your moods are not inevitable. They are settings, and settings can be adjusted. But before you can change them, you must see them clearly. This is not about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your authorship. For years, perhaps decades, your observer has been quietly shaping your experience without your permission. Identifying those settings is the first step in taking back control. It's like discovering the blueprint behind a building. You can't renovate what you haven't first uncovered. So as you move forward, ask yourself, what stories keep repeating in my life? What patterns seem unbreakable? What do I tell myself about why things are the way they are? Every answer you give is a clue to the code running in the background of your observer function. And the more honest you are with yourself, the clearer the picture will become. The journey you're on is not about judgment, it's about awareness. Once you see your settings, you can begin the process of resetting them. And that is where transformation begins, not in wishing the world would change, but in adjusting the lens through which you see it. Because once the lens shifts, the entire world rearranges itself to match. And that's exactly where we're heading next. You've seen the problem. You've begun to identify the patterns. Now it's time to explore how to break them, how to reset the observer, so your reality no longer has to recycle the same old story. By now, you've begun to see the hidden machinery behind your reality, the observer settings that filter what you notice and what you miss, what feels possible and what feels impossible. Awareness alone is powerful, but it is not enough. Knowing you're wearing tinted glasses won't change what you see unless you take them off or switch them out. That's where the reset process comes in, the deliberate act of breaking the pattern so you can step into a different reality. The first thing to understand is why the traditional advice of just think positive almost always fails. Positive thinking often works on the surface, like painting bright colors over cracked walls. You tell yourself affirmations, you try to pump yourself full of optimism, but underneath, your observer function is still tuned to the same old frequency. The subconscious filters haven't shifted. So even if you say, I'm successful, your observer is still scanning for proof that you're not. The mind senses the contradiction, and the reset fails before it begins. To reset your observer, you have to work at the level of patterns, not just thoughts. Patterns are the grooves carved into your brain through repetition and emotional intensity. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated input. Each time you respond to life in the same old way, you reinforce the old wiring. But here's the miracle. The moment you interrupt that automatic cycle, you create space for something new to form. Think about what happens when a song skips on a record. For a moment, the loop is broken. The music stutters, and in that disruption lies the opportunity to reset the rhythm. Your observer works in much the same way. You must create a break in the cycle, a pattern interrupt, so your brain is no longer running the same script unconsciously. This is why practices like meditation, breathwork, or even a sudden change of perspective can be so powerful. They jolt you out of your default setting long enough to glimpse another possibility. But the reset process is not just about disruption, it's about direction. Once the old loop is interrupted, you must immediately introduce a new pattern, or the brain will snap back to what it knows best. That's why the window right after a reset attempt is so critical. Within 48 hours, the brain is malleable, open to reprogramming. If you leave that space empty, the old settings will rush back in. But if you fill it with deliberate focus, new beliefs, new expectations, new models, you give your observer a new script to run. Let's make this real. Imagine you've always carried the belief that you're not creative. Every time you face a problem, your observer automatically filters out inventive solutions, steering you towards safe and familiar answers. Now suppose you have a reset moment. Maybe during meditation, you drop into silence, or during a workshop, someone challenges your assumption. In that instant, the old pattern is disrupted. You suddenly see that creativity is not about being a painter or a poet. It's about approaching problems with fresh eyes. Now the clock is ticking. Over the next 48 hours, every small action you take to reinforce this new perspective, jotting down ideas, experimenting, allowing play, cements new neural connections. Ignore it and the old setting creeps back. Use it, and you start to rewrite your observer. This is why real resets are not one-time miracles. They are processes. They require intention, repetition, and a willingness to embrace discomfort. Because make no mistake, breaking patterns feels uncomfortable. The brain prefers familiarity, even if familiarity means being stuck. When you start to reset your observer, you may feel resistance. Doubts will arise. The old stories will try to pull you back. But this discomfort is not failure. It is proof that the reset is working. It means you've stepped off the well-worn path and into new territory. Over time, as you practice resetting, you build resilience. You realize that you don't have to be at the mercy of your old programming. You can pause, interrupt, and redirect. And each reset, no matter how small, lays down new tracks in the brain. These tracks grow stronger the more you use them, until eventually they become the new default. So the reset process is both science and art. Science, because it relies on the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity. Art, because it requires you to notice the subtleties of your own patterns and respond with creativity. You're not just changing your thoughts, you're changing the very filter that defines what is real for you. And once you begin, the shift is undeniable. Life feels less like a rigid script and more like a living canvas. But here's the key: the reset is not the end, it's the doorway. Once you've disrupted the old and opened space for the new, the real work begins. You have to consciously choose what programs you want your observer to run, what expectations you want to set, and what reality you want to tune into. Because if you don't choose, the past will choose for you. That's where we're headed next. Having broken the pattern, the question becomes, what new programs will you install? What beliefs, expectations, and models will you feed your observer so that it begins filtering reality in your favor? The reset cracks the shell. The next step is to plant the seed of a new reality inside. Breaking old patterns is only half the journey. Once the reset has created space, the question becomes, what do you install in its place? Because make no mistake, your observer cannot remain empty. If you don't consciously choose the programs it runs, the old defaults will quietly slide back in. This is where you shift from being a passenger in your reality to becoming the driver. To install new observer programs, you must first decide what you want your lens to highlight. Remember, your attention acts like a spotlight. Wherever it shines, life responds by showing you more of the same. If you want to experience abundance, you must train your observer to notice opportunities, resources, and possibilities instead of problems and limitations. If you want to experience love and connection, you must guide your observer to focus on moments of warmth and evidence of support, rather than scanning for rejection or betrayal. This process begins with conscious choice. You can think of it as selecting a new operating system. The old programs, scarcity, fear, self-doubt, have been running on autopilot for years. Now you install a new set: abundance, opportunity, resilience, creativity. Each of these programs is more than just a belief. It's a lens that reshapes what becomes visible in your daily life. Selective attention is one of the most powerful tools here. Your brain cannot process everything at once, so you decide what gets amplified. Installing a new program means choosing over and over again which signals to tune into. For example, when something goes wrong, your old observer may immediately zoom in on what was lost. But your new program can be trained to notice what was gained, the lesson, the resilience, the hidden advantage. Over time, this shift in focus rewires your brain to default toward solutions instead of problems. Of course, this isn't about ignoring reality or pretending everything is perfect. It's about deciding what reality you want to grow. Imagine walking through a garden. Weeds and flowers exist side by side. Your attention is like water. Whatever you focus on, you nourish. Install a program that waters opportunities, gratitude, and resourcefulness, and soon the weeds begin to shrink from neglect. Repetition is the engine of installation. A single moment of clarity isn't enough to rewrite your observer. The brain needs repeated exposure to new patterns before they become default. Think of how you learned to drive or play an instrument. At first it felt awkward and unnatural. But through consistent practice, new neural pathways formed. Eventually, what was once effortful became automatic. The same is true for installing observer programs. At first, choosing abundance over scarcity feels forced. But the more you practice, the more natural it becomes, until one day you realize you no longer have to think about it. Emotional intensity is the second key. The brain doesn't just encode repetition, it encodes emotion. That's why some memories remain vivid decades later, while countless daily moments are forgotten. If you combine repetition with genuine emotion, excitement, gratitude, joy, the installation process accelerates. Each time you feel an abundant possibility with intensity, your brain strengthens the new wiring. Each time you vividly imagine yourself thriving and attach that vision to positive emotion, your observer takes note and begins to filter reality accordingly. This is why rituals matter. Daily practices like visualization, journaling, or mindful gratitude are not empty routines. They are the scaffolding that installs and reinforces your chosen programs. When you consistently place your focus on what you want to grow, you are teaching your observer what to look for. And once your observer expects it, life has a funny way of revealing more and more of it. Think of someone who decides to adopt a program of opportunity. At first, they might have to consciously remind themselves each morning, "I am open to opportunities today." Then, as they go about their day, they train themselves to notice even small signs, an unexpected conversation, a chance email, a new idea. Over weeks and months, their observer begins to anticipate these openings automatically. Suddenly they seem lucky, but in truth, their new programs simply tuned their lens to what was always there, waiting to be seen. Of course, installing new programs is not without resistance. The old observer doesn't vanish overnight. Doubt creeps in. Old stories whisper, "This isn't real. You're fooling yourself." But each time you catch that voice and redirect your focus, you strengthen the new installation. Resistance is not a sign you're failing. It's a sign that the old program is losing ground. So this chapter is about more than theory. It's about choice. Each day you choose what to amplify and what to ignore. Each day you decide which program your observer runs. And those small daily choices accumulate into something extraordinary, a reality that looks nothing like the one you left behind. Soon, you'll start noticing it. The world will respond differently. Coincidences will multiply. Doors will open where you once saw only walls. That's when you'll know your new observer programs are not just installed. They're alive, running in the background, shaping your experience moment by moment. And this brings us to the next stage of the journey. Once you've installed these programs, reality begins to shift in ways that can feel both exhilarating and disorienting. Some changes will come quickly, others gradually. Some will feel magical, while others may trigger old fears. The important thing is to recognize them for what they are, signs that your new observer is working. That's what we'll explore in the next chapter, how reality starts shifting and what to expect as the new you begins to take shape. Something remarkable begins to happen once new observer programs are installed. The world that once felt predictable starts to behave differently. It isn't that reality itself suddenly changes overnight. It's that you begin to perceive and interact with it in a completely new way. For many, this shift can feel both exhilarating and unsettling. After all, when your familiar filters dissolve, you are no longer living inside the same story you've known for years. You are stepping into a new one. The first thing you'll notice is that some changes arrive quickly, almost instantly. Small synchronicities appear, like meeting the right person at the right moment or stumbling onto a solution you've been searching for. A problem that once seemed like a dead end now reveals an opening. These are not accidents. They are signals that your observer is tuned differently. Where your old lens would have filtered out those possibilities, your new lens allows them through. And because you notice them, you act on them, which creates a cascade of results. Other changes are more gradual, unfolding like a season turning. You might find yourself reacting differently in situations that used to trigger you. Maybe you stay calm where you once panicked, or you find humor where you once felt anger. These subtle shifts in perception accumulate quietly until one day you realize you are no longer the same person you were. Your default settings have been altered, and with them the course of your life. But here's the paradox. Even as these shifts feel empowering, they can also feel deeply uncomfortable. Change rarely feels smooth in the moment. The brain is wired to prefer the familiar, even if the familiar is painful. So when you begin living from a new observer state, part of you resists. Old fears resurface. Doubts creep in. You may even feel pulled back toward the very patterns you worked to reset. This is not a sign of failure. It is a natural response to transformation. The old identity is fighting for survival. Imagine upgrading the operating system on your computer. At first, some programs run smoother, faster, more efficiently, but other applications may glitch or refuse to work the way they used to. Your old identity functions the same way. It was designed to run on the previous system. So when your new observer begins to perceive abundance instead of scarcity, possibility instead of limitation, the old habits and relationships built on the former settings may clash with the new you. This is when resistance often shows up from your environment as well. People who are used to you operating in a certain way may not immediately understand or accept the shift. If you once played small and suddenly you begin expressing confidence, those around you might push back. If you've always carried the story of never enough and you begin living as though the world is full of opportunity, others may question or criticize. This too is part of the process. Your external world is adjusting to match your internal transformation. But along with resistance comes wonder. One of the clearest signs of a shifting observer is the rise of synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that feel too precise to be random. You think about a friend and they call you. You start focusing on a new career direction and an unexpected opportunity appears. These events aren't magic in the sense of bending the laws of nature. They're the natural outcome of a mind tuned to notice what once remained invisible. The synchronicities were always possible, but until your observer shifted, you couldn't recognize them as openings. As your new programs strengthen, Life begins to feel less like a rigid path and more like a dynamic conversation. You set an intention, reality responds. You shift your focus, new patterns emerge. Instead of being trapped in the same story, you realize you are co-authoring a new one with each choice you make. And that realization itself changes everything. Still, it's important to be patient. Not every shift is instant, and not every sign is obvious. Sometimes the first evidence of change comes in the form of discomfort, a relationship ending, a job no longer fitting, an old habit becoming intolerable. These may feel like losses, but they are often clearings. The old must loosen its grip to make space for the new. Trust that the process is unfolding, even when it doesn't match your expectations. The more you hold steady in your new observer state, the more reality stabilizes around it. At first, the shifts may feel fragile, like a candle flame flickering in the wind. But with practice, repetition, and emotional reinforcement, the flame grows stronger. Over time, the new reality becomes as familiar as the old one once was, only this time, it's aligned with your chosen programs instead of your inherited defaults. So when reality begins to shift, expect both magic and messiness. Expect moments of awe when life delivers in ways you couldn't have scripted, and expect moments of tension as the old identity tries to pull you back. Both are signs that your observer is working. Both are proof that change is real. And as you move forward, the challenge is no longer just about noticing the shifts, it's about sustaining them. Because transformation is not a one-time event, it's a practice. The next step is learning how to maintain your new reality, how to stabilize your observer at its higher setting so the changes don't fade away but compound into something extraordinary. That's what we'll explore in the final chapter, the mastery of the observer and how to keep building on what you've begun. Shifting your observer and experiencing the first signs of a new reality is exhilarating. But the real work begins once the novelty wears off. Change is not sustained by one powerful breakthrough. It's sustained by the daily choices that follow. If you want your new observer programs to last, you must practice advanced mastery, treating your observer not as a one-time project, but as a living system that requires ongoing attention. Daily practices are the foundation. Think of them as calibration rituals, the way a musician tunes their instrument before every performance. Even if you've mastered the song, the instrument drifts out of tune without care. Your observer's the same. Whether it's through meditation, journaling, gratitude practices, or intentional reflection, you need a consistent way of realigning your lens each day. These small acts may not feel dramatic, but over time they compound, creating stability in your new reality. Setbacks will happen, and mastery doesn't mean avoiding them. It means responding differently when they arise. Old triggers may resurface. Doubts may creep back. Life may throw unexpected challenges. The question isn't whether you'll stumble, but how quickly you recover. In the past, a setback might have spiraled into days or weeks of self-sabotage. With advanced observer mastery, you catch yourself sooner. You notice the old pattern trying to pull you back, and instead of collapsing into it, you reset. This is where resilience becomes second nature. As your new reality stabilizes, you'll also discover how to scale it. What begins as personal transformation inevitably spills outward. The way you show up in relationships shifts. The energy you bring to your work transforms. Opportunities appear where none seemed possible before. Others begin to notice the difference in you, often without being able to explain it. They sense a clarity, a groundedness, a presence. This is the ripple effect of observer mastery. Your lens not only changes what you see, it changes how others experience you. Scaling your observer mastery also means daring to expand your vision. Once you've proven to yourself that change is real, you can apply the same principles to bigger arenas, your career, your community, even your long-term legacy. Each time you upgrade your observer, you step into a larger reality. What once felt impossible becomes the new baseline. And from that baseline, even greater possibilities emerge. The compound effect is what makes this journey extraordinary. Small adjustments repeated over time create massive transformations. One shift in how you interpret rejection might change how you approach opportunities. That shift opens a door you would have otherwise ignored. That door leads to a connection that transforms your career. From the outside, it looks like luck. From the inside, you know it's the natural outcome of maintaining your observer function at its highest setting. But mastery is not static. It requires humility and vigilance. The moment you assume your observer no longer needs tending is the moment the old patterns begin to creep back. Remember, the brain is wired for efficiency. If left unchecked, it will drift toward the familiar. Advanced observer mastery means continually choosing, not once, not occasionally, but every single day. Choosing what to focus on, what to amplify, what to ignore. Choosing which story to tell yourself, which lens to polish, which reality to grow. In this way, maintaining your new reality becomes less about effort and more about identity. You are no longer someone trying to change. You are someone who lives from a different observer state. This is who you are now. And because identity is the most powerful driver of human behavior, when you align with this truth, consistency becomes natural. You don't have to force yourself to practice. You practice because it's simply what you do. The reward of mastery is not just stability, but freedom. You are no longer trapped in cycles you didn't choose. You are no longer at the mercy of unconscious filters. You are free to shape your perception deliberately, free to expand your vision, free to co-create a reality that reflects your highest possibilities. This freedom is not theoretical. It is lived in the way you navigate challenges, the way you see opportunities, the way you move through the world with intention, and perhaps most importantly, mastery allows you to give back. As your observer shifts, you become an example for others. You demonstrate what is possible when someone chooses to take ownership of their lens. Without preaching, without pushing, your presence becomes permission for others to do the same. In this way, observer mastery doesn't just transform your personal reality, it has the power to transform collective reality as well. So, as you arrive at the end of this journey, remember this is not the end at all. It is the beginning of a lifelong practice. The observer problem may have kept you stuck in the past, but now you know how to reset, reprogram, and maintain your lens. You hold the keys to perception. You hold the power to shift reality. The question now is simple. What will you choose to see, and what kind of world will unfold because of it? You've traveled far, from the first chapter where we uncovered the invisible wall of the observer problem, to the final mastery of maintaining a new lens. You've seen that reality is not fixed. It is filtered, interpreted, and shaped by the observer behind your eyes. And now you know, that observer is not some mysterious force outside your control. It is you. In the beginning, you saw how the default observer keeps you trapped. Old beliefs, inherited expectations, and unconscious filters had you replaying the same story over and over again, no matter how badly you wanted a new one. But you also discovered that this trap was not permanent. It was simply familiar. Like glasses you forgot you were wearing, the observer colored everything you saw, convincing you that what you noticed was all there was. Then we broke it down. The observer function revealed itself as a system of beliefs, expectations, and mental models. We saw how these internal settings act like forecasts, shaping your reality long before events even unfold. We looked at the difference between passive observation, simply reacting to life, and active creation, where your attention becomes a spotlight, reorganizing reality around what you choose to focus on. From there, you learned to identify your current settings. You began to notice the stories you tell yourself, the patterns that repeat, the invisible instructions quietly handed down by your past. It wasn't always comfortable to look so closely, but awareness was the turning point. Once you could see the blueprint, you realized you could change it. That's when the reset process entered the picture. You saw why surface-level positivity so often fails, and why real change requires breaking patterns at their root. Through neuroplasticity, and deliberate pattern interrupts, you discovered how to jolt your brain out of its old groove and create a critical window for rewiring. You understood that discomfort is not a sign of failure, but evidence that change is real, that the old system is losing its grip. And then, in Chapter 5, you began installing new programs. You saw that attention is nourishment, that whatever you focus on grows stronger. Through repetition and emotional intensity, you learned how to condition your observer to amplify abundance, opportunity, and solutions rather than scarcity, fear, and limitation. You saw that the brain is programmable and that you are the one holding the code. The shifts came next. Reality began to respond differently, sometimes in ways that felt magical. Synchronicities appeared, new possibilities emerged, and subtle changes in your reactions added up to profound transformations. You also discovered that these shifts often come with resistance, both from within and from the outside world. Yet you now understood that resistance was part of the process, the old identity testing its boundaries before dissolving into something new. Finally, in Chapter 7, you stepped into mastery. You saw that maintaining your new observer is less about grand gestures and more about daily alignment. You learned that setbacks are not failures but opportunities to reset quickly, that scaling your observer from personal to professional to relational realities allows your shifts to ripple outward. And you came to understand the compound effect, that small, consistent adjustments over time create a life that looks nothing like the one you started with. So where does this leave you? With freedom. The freedom to choose your lens instead of inheriting it. The freedom to notice possibilities where others see only problems. The freedom to co-create a reality that aligns with your highest vision rather than your oldest fears. This freedom is not something you wait for. It is something you practice every single day with every single choice. The truth is, you are always observing. The only question is, through which lens? Will you slip back into unconscious patterns, letting your past write your future? Or will you live as the master of your observer, tuning your perception to match the life you want to experience? The power is in your hands. It always has been. Now that you've seen the machinery behind the curtain, you can never go back to believing reality is fixed. You know the secret. The observer shapes the observed, and you are the observer. So as you step beyond this journey, remember this: each morning you wake up, you are given the chance to tune your lens anew. Each thought, each focus, each story you choose is a seed planted in the soil of your reality. And if you keep planting with intention, watering with attention, and reinforcing with emotion, the garden of your life will flourish in ways that once felt impossible. The wall you once believed was keeping you stuck was never real. It was only the edge of your old observer. Now there are no walls, only horizons. The rest of your life is waiting. The only question left is, what will you choose to see?